everyone. My name's Sharzad. Thank you so much for joining me for my conversation series where I talk to parents, teens, and educators about the harmful and potentially harmful effects of social media on teens. Today, I am talking to a high school algebra teacher who has lots of interesting things to say about how teens are interacting with technology. Thanks for watching. Hi, Lee. My name's Sharzad. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you have a young daughter, right, who just turned 1. Congratulations.
Thank you. And a 5-year-old son.
Oh, so you're busy. I know that life. Yeah, I've got 2 also. They're older now. It gets a little easier. Have you had a lot of kids like that that have been in your class that have been cyberbullied or had a tough time with a breakup in high school that's gone on to social media that like sort of everybody knows about? I mean, I hear these stories about teenage girls and guys, but mostly girls having naked photos of them being passed around high school. I hear about bullying. I mean, I've been online for like 11 years. I've certainly had horrible things said about me, but I've always, been an adult the whole time I've been online. And I know how to work through, being sad if somebody says something mean to me. But if I was a teenager, it'd be a totally different experience. And I think about that all the time. So what have you seen like that kids are dealing with?
Yeah, definitely. Inappropriate photos. That's gotten anecdotally, I guess, that seems to have gotten better. So this is my 9th year teaching. When I first started teaching, that was something that was bad. There were kids that were like collecting them, and then like they would have Instagram or Snapchat account, and they would post all the girls that they had like collected, and which is just I think once they started cracking down on that's what really started a lot of the cyberbullying laws and the child pornography law protection. I think once that happened, that scared a lot of kids and a lot of schools and administrators and teachers. We really push awareness to, if you do this, understand like this is this distribution of child pornography and that'll follow you forever.
Right.
Things like that. So that still happens. Don't get me wrong, that still happens, but it's something that has improved. Cyberbullying definitely still happens. It's tough because what happens a lot is you can create an anonymous Instagram account, for example, and this is what happened. Is slightly side note, similar. There were fight accounts for the school I was at, and it's not just my school. There were several schools where you type in that school's name, fights or brawls, and you'll see on Instagram all the fights that happens because they'll record the fights and they'll post them on there. But then there's also accounts like there's one called my old school name, Slump. And that's for if people fall asleep in class or on the bus or at the lunch table, people take a picture and then that Slumped account that everybody follows will post it. And I know kids are terrified of getting posted on there where it's not something that's like really heinous bullying, but it's at that age, they're so sensitive that they definitely don't want to be called out that way in a negative light and exposed to hundreds or possibly thousands of people that follow that account. So stuff like that happens, and you don't know who the account creator is, and the people will just DM pictures that they took in class, and the account creator will just repost it, and so that's how the images get shared. So whoever took the picture is anonymous, and you don't know who took the picture, and you don't know who runs that account.
So creepy, just the feeling of being watched all the time. I mean, I always think about myself as a teenager and how much, freedom I had to just get in trouble and like make dumb mistakes, and nobody was, I wasn't under a microscope. How has it changed? You said you've been a teacher for 9 years, and I know COVID was brutal, but from the 9 years to now, has it, I know you said this sort of, child pornography stuff has gotten a little bit better, cyberbullying the same, but do you think addiction to social media, to the apps, has just gone crazy?
Definitely. I definitely think so. It's something that it was a negative trend before COVID. And the best example I can give is like, we're on a negative trend line. Every year it's a little worse, but it's not enough to where you're like, whoa, it's gotten crazy. It's kind of bad and something that adults complain about and kids roll their eyes about. With COVID and with digital learning, those kids that stayed home, most of them, not all of them, but most of them were on Netflix, on their phone, on PlayStation, and it really exacerbated their addiction to when they tried to come back into the classroom. Now it's like, it's something that they can't be without. They cannot be without their phone. If you had them put it away for a test, it makes them visibly uncomfortable, where it's a really, really bad addiction. I was addicted to sugar. I went no sugar for like a year one time, and I didn't realize how addicted to sugar I was. In the first 2 or 3 weeks, like I was mad, I was grouchy, and I see them when their phone gets taken away, everything changes, and it's unfortunate, and it's hard because at their age, they want to be socially connected, and that's how they socially connect right now. And when you take that away and remove it, I mean, it's like isolating a prisoner in self-containment there, where you totally isolate them. Taking a phone from a kid in a lot of ways is like completely isolating them, and you can tell how uncomfortable it makes them and how just they're not okay with it.
God, I think about how teenagers, it seems like, and I don't know any teenagers really, but so I'm pretty out of the loop with them, but it seems like they're socializing in real life a lot less and quote unquote socializing more on the apps. Do you feel like teenagers are still like doing things in groups? Because when I happen to see them every now and then, like at a restaurant or whatever, I usually see groups of teenagers and they're all on their own phones. They're not even talking. Not all the time, but I certainly have noticed that a lot, where they're like together, but they're all in their in their own worlds on their phones. And I keep hearing about how teenagers are like together, but I like still just, on their phones. Do you see that, or are they still being social without phones?
It depends on the kids and the groups. It's definitely, again, something that's gotten worse. And that's honestly, it seems like society in some ways. You see people out to dinner, it's the same thing. And, there's been challenges I've seen online where people, everybody puts their phone in the middle, and first person to touch their phone has to pay for everybody's dinner.
Oh, I like that.
If you touch your phone before the check comes. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like you can see kids like hanging out and they're kind of all on their phone. It might be like, hey, look at this, or hey, did you see this online? They're just they're comparing and sharing what they see online as their socialization a lot of times.
Right. I mean, adults do that too. I see that all the time with adults too. What do you think parents can do to help sort of, attack this beast that is social media?
Yeah, it's hard because, and I have, a young child of my own he's a kindergartner now. And, my wife and I, we adopted a high school senior when this was six years ago. And even thinking back to that now, the landscape is so different. But whenever we had adopted him, he was a high school senior. He had kind of fallen with a crowd he didn't need to be if he wanted to graduate. And so we helped him out, and he's doing great now. He's actually, I'm really proud of him. So he didn't have a phone, and I said, listen, I'll buy you a phone and you can pay for the monthly payment. Okay. But here's the deal. If your grades fall below a B, the second they fall below a B, I take the phone up. As soon as your grades go back to A's and B's, I give you the phone back, even though you're paying for the monthly bill. Is that a deal? He's like, yeah, it's a deal. Okay. So after about a month of school, one of his grades fell down to a C, and I walked in his room. I said, hey, give me your phone. He's like, what do you mean? Like, I told you, if your grades fall below a B. And his grades went back up to all A's and B's and didn't drop the rest of the year. And this was a kid who had failed at least one class every year of high school, and he made the honor roll. And that's a tool for parents where, like, most kids, and honestly, people are addicted to devices in some degree. So like if you set the bar for your kid and set the expectation, and you can use the phone as that. Like I have kids in my class now who their grades below already where their parents want it to be. The parent took their phone, and you see their effort in class skyrocket. Between not having that distraction in their pocket, even though they're not on it, but between not having that distraction and having that incentive to get it back, that makes a huge difference. I think also having parents be aware of ways that teenagers are teenagers and hide things online. Like there's calculator apps that are fake calculators, but you type in a code and there are private photo collections in that app. But it looks like a calculator. You look on the phone and you see that it's a calculator, but once they type in a code, now there's private photo collections that aren't in the regular photo. So even if parents they think they're being responsible and checking their adolescents' phones, they might not be aware of things like that because they're always finding workarounds. So staying up to date and educated and literate in the sense of what the most recent way people are hiding stuff is. But I think honestly too, just being open with your kid and saying, hey, this is kind of what I expect, but I'm probably going to look through your phone because you're 12 years old and the unfiltered access to the internet is not good for you. And we've never experienced this in all of human development. And I need to be your parent and understand that it's because I care. And I don't want to see you struggle with different things that could happen because of that. Because I see kids that think things are normal, like sexually, between like screen names or things that they talk about just in public, like at the mall, in my classroom, the things that they talk about in a public setting, in a school setting, it's appalling. But it's because when you have unfiltered access to the internet, they're seeing a lot of sexually inappropriate images or even just inappropriate language all the time. And they think it's normal. And they think they don't think it's wrong, if that makes sense.
Right. Like they're just becoming desensitized to sex and violence and bullying if they just see it all the time.
Exactly.
Geez, the parents have a lot of work cut out for them.
Yeah.
I'm curious does the school talk about the harmful effects, like either school that you've been at? Like, do they, like in morning assemblies or anything, is there a discussion about like consequences of social media that teenagers might not necessarily be thinking about? Like, hey, if you post a naked photo and your face is in that and it's on the internet, like it's going to stay there for a while. So if you're going to post a naked photo, at least don't put your face in it. I mean, is there any sort of like actual logical thing? Because it's hard to expect that teenagers are just going to be perfect and not be rebellious and get into trouble. But is there a way to like reduce the long-term damage through like conversations with the school? Like, I'm just wondering how much communication there is around it.
There's typically an assembly at the beginning of the year. They do by grade level. So they'll have like a senior meeting and a junior meeting. And it's mentioned in that, but they mention a bunch of stuff. They talk for 30 minutes and teenagers are already rolling their eyes walking into it. It might be a bullet point as in like, be aware of this, but also bullet points of if you're bullying or harassing a kid, and this has gotten into legally kind of interesting situations. I don't know is the best way to put it. Used to it, if schools thought or did have jurisdiction where if like you were bullying a kid off campus, schools could discipline you for that. I believe that is no longer the case. If two students go to the same school and student X bullies student Y off campus, like outside of school hours, I don't think the school can do a whole lot about it anymore, other than maybe call in and talk to parents or counseling. But as far as like discipline, don't think there's a lot they can do anymore.
That seems like a shame. I don't know. I mean, I don't know who is ultimately responsible in this sort of situation. Parents, teens, the apps, the school. You'd like to think it's sort of a community effort to try and keep kids sane and healthy and safe and all that. But I don't know who's really responsible. A little bit of everything, maybe. I'm curious to know if you have advice for teenagers when it comes to social media use from a teacher perspective. You're like, how do I even wrap my head around that one?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, the less you could engage with it, the better. It's hard at your teenage years because your brain and your frontal lobe isn't fully developed, and it's very easy to tie your self-worth into how many likes you get or how many comments you get. And you might have people even who aren't even teenagers anymore talk about this, where you might have 100 comments, but you have that one person who's just intentionally trolling you just to like get a rise out of people. That one person says something negative or mean or personally attacks you, and you ignore the other 99 positive comments, and you let that just dig at you and affect your mental health in a negative way. So I don't know, the less you engage with social media, typically, I think the healthier you are mentally. If you feel like you need it to stay involved and connected with your peers and your social group, that's understandable, but don't let it be something where you're tying your self-worth to your posts and your likes and your comments. And if people say something, it's hard at your age to let it go. It's very, very hard to ignore something because it takes a lot of confidence. And the way to build confidence is through experience and feeling that. And no teenager feels confident. No teenager truly deep down feels really confident and self-confident. And it's a hard skill to build. Right. There's a lot of adults who don't feel self-confident deep down.
Totally.
So 2007, the first iPhone came out. Those kids in 2007, if you were born in 2007, if you're 15, you're a high school freshman or sophomore. The first iPad came out in 2010. So those kids are 12 now. So me having young children, so I'm a parent to young children, I see a lot of parents, feed the tablet to the kids, because parenting's hard and life is hard and COVID was hard and all these things we're having. And a lot of times it's easier just to placate that child and then give them a tablet and a distraction. And I'm guilty of it too. I'm not perfect. My kid has a tablet, but I'm interested, scared of the effects of these kids who have been tablet fed, and some of them a lot more than others. As I work with high schoolers, so in 2 years I'll have that first generation where the iPad 1 came out, and that it wasn't super popular then. So in 5 years, when those kids who grew up on iPads, what's the addiction going to be like? What's the reliance going to be like? The other thing that's interesting is I really thought, so I'm 33 years old. I guess a millennial, born in 1988. So I came up, I remember when we got our first computer in 1995. I remember Windows 95 and Windows 98 and Windows XP and all those operating systems. And I remember using them in classes growing up. And I really thought, okay, well, that was all new to me, and it was very clunky. So when I first transitioned into teaching, I really thought that teenagers were going to be like, great tech skills. It's not. And I've realized it's because technology and apps are designed where the easier it is to use, the more engaged someone's going to be, the more likely they are to come back to it, so apps are designed to make using things easier. Well, the effect of that has been a lot of adolescents and teenagers and young adults have very, very poor computer literacy skills. I'm talking copy paste. I'm talking basic Google searches. They struggle with how to search and look things up. So I don't know, that's just a kind of another interesting thing that has happened. I know it's not exactly related to social media, but the rise of technology and social media and apps making things easier has in turn made a lot of skills worse that are still necessary.
Right. It's almost like dumbing down the population in a way.
In a way, they're not able to do skills that I thought they'd be really good at, because I thought they'd be great with technology, having grown up with it, but they don't know because it's just always just been spoon fed to them.
Right. I know when you grow up with social media, you don't know anything different. So it's always, every time I have a conversation about this, I'm always projecting how I would have been. But that's because I think about me now, and, these kids are just growing up with it. So that's totally their norm. This seems like a really hard addiction for people to sort of manage. I mean, because adults aren't managing it.
Right. And that's one thing. You asked me about advice, and I should have said this. That is one of the good parts of technology, that it makes things a lot easier. You can set screen limit timers where on any smartphone or smart device, you can set it where it'll lock you out after a certain amount of screen time. Whether parents find that information useful or teenagers, like if you want to be successful and try and manage social media and technology to where it doesn't become a full-blown addiction, where you're removed from the people around you in a sense, like society, because you're so zoned in on your phone. And I've had to do this myself sometimes. I catch myself with this. You set limits, screen time limits, where it's only X amount of hours per week. For grad school, I did a research project, and it got disrupted by COVID. But my research, the idea was that if you looked at how much screen time students had per week, and then looked at their test grades, that there should be a correlation there, a negative correlation. The more screen time, the lower the test grades. And as I was collecting data, I was appalled at how many hours of screen time some kids had per week. I'm talking like, I had some 80, 90, 100 hour week screen times. Yeah. Where it's, easily 12 to 14 hours a day. And because at first when I saw, say it was like 11 hours and 43 minutes, and I was like, oh, that's not bad. And then that was 11 hours and 43 minutes per day. Yeah, that was the daily average. That
blows my mind. I thought it would be like 4, 5, 6 hours max. And then I started talking to more teens, and they were telling me, what they're spending, and it'd be like 7 hours just on one app. And then they'd go to the other app, and then you add that all up, and it was 14, 15 hours a day, which means they're only taking a break when they're sleeping. They're not even eating or going to I think they're probably going to the bathroom and eating and doing everything with their phone. It's crazy to me. So,
or they'll fall asleep they'll go to sleep on FaceTime with their friends, or different FaceTime type party apps. Yeah. And it's like, you're not getting good sleep, first of all. And why? They're so afraid of missing out from that connection. And I don't know, it's hard. There's a lot of problems and not a lot of great solutions, because again, you're competing with billions and billions of dollars that are competing against each other for your attention.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I had such a good conversation with you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. As always, I encourage you to check out the Organization for Social Media Safety website. You can find it in the show notes or in the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube. Check it out. Take the amazing super course. It's designed for parents who are parents of teenagers, and it's really thorough. It goes over everything that a parent might need to keep their kids safe online. You can find, it's just a wealth of knowledge. So definitely check it out.